Hi, welcome to Community Focus. I'm Stevens Point Mayor Gary Wescott, and thank you for joining us today on Community Focus. Again, so much to report to the community of Stevens Point, surrounding areas, Plover, Hull, Whiting, Park Ridge. Really, a lot of what I'm going to talk about today is going to impact all of us in the very near future. I want to begin by focusing on this proposed cut of over $300 million to the University of Wisconsin system. That is an unacceptable number. Entirely too big of a cut, too devastating of a cut. Too much damage will be done to our fine universities, not only in this city, but in cities across the state of Wisconsin, including our capital city of Madison. I think perhaps Chancellor Bernie Patterson said it best when I recently read a quote of his, that he talks about how at the University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point, our fine campus alone, state funding under the proposal from Governor Walker to the state legislature would decline in the next 2 years to an amount not seen since most of the current students were born, according to the chancellor. It also appears as if the students are being forced to pay for more than $1 billion in income and property tax cuts, according to State Representative Katrina Shanklin. I agree with that position. Now, Shanklin also recently noted in a meeting that I had with the state representative that Wisconsin could have saved up to $500 million if it had accepted the federal revenue to expand Wisconsin's Badger Care program under the Affordable Care Act. Now, Wisconsin right now, by the way, is the last state in the Midwest not to accept that type of federal revenue. But what I'd like to do today is speak to you as a father and as a grandfather. Certainly, Chancellor Patterson and his team, including Greg Deemer, the Vice Chancellor Provost, are in a much better position to detail to the community, to the county, to the region, why these cuts are too deep and will hurt an extremely fine university here in Stevens Point. They're far more qualified to talk about that than I am. But what I really would like to do is to address you as a parent and a grandparent today for just a moment on Community Focus. Certainly, as you think about the future of education with these cuts, the cost of going to school for many of your children, many of your grandchildren, is going to be out of reach. Gone will be the dream of a university education taught primarily in Stevens Point by a candidate or by a professor with a PhD, because the tuition, because of more and more and more reductions in state aid, are going to negatively impact the quality of education. So as parents and grandparents, we need to be mindful that as that small child or that small grandchild grows up and wants an education in the university system, it may be out of reach because of decisions that are being made today in the state legislature. I urge any parent, any grandparent to contact State Representative Shanklin, State Senator Julie Lassa, contact the governor's office, contact any member of the state legislature, and tell them that a $300 million cut is too deep, too devastating. And it's ironic that these cuts come at a time that the governor is talking about a $220 million amount of money for a new Bucks arena. And I love basketball. I've played basketball in my life, not against the basketball or the Bucks. I think it's also ironic that it comes at a time where the governor is talking about another $1.2 billion in borrowing for transportation projects. Borrowing money is not free money. You have to pay that back. So people who say, well, there's no immediate tax impact, that really isn't accurate. I mean, we know that if you borrow money from the bank, you're going to have to pay it back. But I think one of the things that I found disturbing is the University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point is such an important component of our community, a critical component in this community. And I truly believe its long-term viability is being threatened by these poor decisions that are being made by some in our capital. Let me give you a couple of examples. There have been a lot of comments made about the university faculty needs to work harder, longer hours, they need to do more. Well, I have to tell you, in the 12 years that I had the honor of serving as your mayor, from 1995 through the year 2007, I did not know a harder working bunch of people than faculty at the University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point. Let me give you some examples. All the way from the chancellors at the time who were engaged in this community, and I met with on a regular basis, concerned about the community, to our vice chancellors, provosts, PhDs, heads of the School of Business and other departments who volunteered their time to serve on committees and commissions and boards in the community. Members of our Police and Fire Commission, our Plan Commission, our Community Development Authority, members who would study, members from the university who would be a part of our comprehensive planning committee. The list could go on. If I really spent the amount of time and listed for the community the exceptional work that these professors have done in helping to develop this community, to aid the community, to guide the community, we'd be doing community focus for several hours today. But that was a part that really disturbed me, as I think it was recently pointed out in a job screening that was done for the university, some type of an internal audit. The average work week for a university professor is over 60 hours per week. They are already working very hard in their classroom, counseling their students, preparing lesson plans, and on top of all that, professors here in Stevens Point are actively engaged in civic government planning. They spend time working with people in our community to make it a better community. And it's important to realize that cities are the economic engines that drive Wisconsin's economy. And the University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point is a critical component in this city. And if you think about cities are the economic engines that drive the state's economy, you can't cripple a part of that community like a university. And there are universities in many communities without having a negative impact. Let me give you some examples of how a city is such an important part of Wisconsin's economy. Wisconsin's metropolitan regions already account for 75% of the state's gross domestic product. Think about that, 75% of the gross domestic product. Wisconsin cities and villages are home to 70% of the state's population, with 87% of all manufacturing property and 89% of all commercial property are in cities or villages. Those are important numbers when we talk about a state's economy and its economic vitality. 89% of all commercial property, 87% of all manufacturing property are in cities and villages in Wisconsin. Most of the small businesses that are created in Wisconsin get their start either in a city or in a village. Cities and villages are where nearly all of the technology-based companies are located in Wisconsin. Startups and other knowledgeable-based economic activity occur almost exclusively within city limits. So the bottom line is a city and the university are interwoven together. They are together as one, serving as one entity, and it's important that for Wisconsin to compete globally, we need to develop and to maintain quality communities, and we can only do that by having quality universities like the University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point. Now, what can you do? Again, as I mentioned a moment ago, if you believe that a $300 million cut is too deep, and I do believe that, then contact your state representative, your state senator, other officials in Madison, perhaps shoot off a nice letter to the governor's office explaining why you believe those cuts are too devastating. We'll keep you posted on that. I know Chancellor Patterson and his team are working very hard to educate the state. Other chancellors throughout Wisconsin are talking about why those cuts are devastating and why we need to really resist that deep cut to quality education here in the state of Wisconsin. You may have recently seen a number of news stories about the city of Stevens Point must balance its debt and its capital needs, according to a number of officials, including our fine comptroller treasurer, Corey Laddick. Now, what are we talking about when we say balancing needs, debt, and capital needs? As I think it's been pointed out, the city's equalized value is an important component in calculating the city's ability to borrow money. The greater the increase in your equalized value, and again, equalized values, what is the city worth if it would put on the market today? If the big for sale sign went up, what would you sell the city for, like your home? Well, the current number in the city of Stevens Point is about $1.6 billion. It hasn't grown much in recent years for a variety of reasons, and because it hasn't grown much in recent years, the city's ability to attract new debt or to spend more money has been limited because of that. About 3% of the equalized value is what the city is allowed to borrow, or about $49.9 million. Now, many of you may realize that we're very close to that debt ceiling as outlined by city ordinance. So in order to really compare what are we going to be doing in the future with what do we need to be doing now, we have in the last 60 days embarked upon a significant plan to implement effective municipal capital plans for future capital needs in the city of Stevens Point. In essence, we have to have a plan when you have very limited access to debt. Right now, as I record this program, the city has about $14 million in available money to it. It sounds like a lot of money, but for a community this size, it really is not. And let me give you a couple of examples why it isn't. The $14 million that we currently have as debt capacity, for you numbers people, about $6 million is already obligated to programs in the year 2015. We have another obligation to spending for the grade separation or overpass on Country Club Drive of about $4 million. There is work that's going to have to be done on Business Highway 51 in the very near future. So you start to get an idea that although we have $14 million, a lot of that money has already been committed. Let me give you another example. Keep in mind the $14 million number I gave you a moment ago. Between today, here we are in 2015, and the year 2018, 4 budget years, this city has capital projects or capital improvements that we are committed to that are in excess of $17 million. I don't think you have to be a Rhodes Scholar in math to realize we don't have that kind of debt capacity. If you add in projects that are also in the pipeline for 2019 and 2020, that number grows to $22.8 million. So the critical need here is to effectively develop a plan that says what are the critical needs of the city, what are the needs that we can perhaps postpone for a few years to recover some of this debt capacity. That's a project we're working on full speed here in the city of Stevens Point. As the comptroller said in a recent news article, we're not in dire straits, but we need to be aware of the direction or trajectory, as he called it, that we were headed, and correct that to a far more fiscally responsible trajectory here in the near future. Boy, so much to talk about here on Community Focus. I better get moving or I'll probably be out of time again here real soon. Don't forget the time has arrived where you can start voting absentee in the city of Stevens Point. We have a major election coming up, a primary on February the 17th for candidates running for mayor and alderperson. Other than District 1, all other of the contested aldermanic races, all other races are contested, I should say. So there is a primary. Circle it on your calendar. February the 17th is Election Day in the city of Stevens Point, where you will be selecting from 6 candidates running for mayor. If you live in one of our districts or wards where there are contested races, you'll also be selecting an alderperson or 2 that will advance to the general election in April. The February 17th primary will decide who are the 2 candidates for mayor that will advance to the general election in April. And of course, absentee voting is open right now as you watch this program on Community Focus. If you have any questions about absentee voting, how do I vote absentee ballot, best advice is contact the city clerk's office. John Moe's office does a great job with information on voting here in the city of Stevens Point. And certainly we'll be able to provide you with that, but circle February the 17th on your calendars. Just briefly in the time that we have here, I did recently sign the contract for paramedic studies in the area. That's something we reported to you on before for the ESCI study on emergency medicine. I signed the contract last week, bringing the evaluators to the area in partnership with Portage County's Executive Patty Dreyer and the Village of Plover, Dan Schluter, and Administrator Dan Mahoney. The city, like Plover and the county, are going to invest about $7,000 in an upgrade to basically update the emergency medical guide for our community. It's an extremely important look at our 2006 master plan and how Portage County has measured up to that 2006 study. The first thing we're going to do is take a real hard look at that 2006 paramedic study and fundamentally say, how have we done as a community? How have we measured in implementing emergency medical procedures in our paramedics and what Portage County has accomplished and what we still need to address here in the near future. We're also going to give recommendations to Portage County for helping to define the quality of service in both delivery and in patient care. We're going to review the current effectiveness of the Portage County technical team along with EMS oversight and a lot of technical aspects of the profession that make it really one of the best emergency medical services in the state of Wisconsin. Talk about this a lot on the program, but your paramedics out of Stevens Point Fire are covering Portage County. It's the only county-wide paramedic program in the state of Wisconsin, and this next generation of emergency medical planning, which is currently underway, will help us to take a really good system and make it even better. Some interesting notes in a recent, and we'll have more on this in the future, a recent Portage County EMS cost comparison study showed this system is extremely effective from cost, both in per mile and per run. We'll have more information on that, but it's an efficient service that is providing quality services at an extremely affordable rate. And I think it's something everybody should be very proud of. Something we're also very proud of is in the Stevens Point area, had a wonderful meeting about a week ago with Sarah Brish. Sarah, many of you may know, is the executive director for our Convention and Visitors Bureau. And fundamentally, 2014 was a banner year for Portage County tourism. It was really an exceptional year for people coming to Portage County, the city of Stevens Point, and utilizing our resources. Let me give you a couple of examples, if I may, here on Community Focus. Combined room tax collections in the city of Stevens Point, Town of Plover, and Village of Plover were up 11% in 2014 versus 2013. That means more people were spending time in accommodations here in our county. People are traveling to Portage County for outdoor recreation, including hiking, biking, canoeing, lots of things to do. And visitors are also coming to the area to take part in performing and visual arts. And Cheryl was quite pleased to announce that they had received a $39,000 grant to promote an 8-week Celebrate the Arts here in Portage County. So lots of good news when it comes to our Convention and Visitors Bureau. Sarah Brish and her team doing a good job promoting the county. And of course, there's always more we can be doing in the very near future to tell people what a wonderful area this is. Come and visit, host your conference or your convention here, and we would be delighted to welcome you. Our team in the Community Development Office has a couple of announcements when it comes to our comprehensive plan update. By now, many of you know that every district, every ward held a comp plan meeting during the last 12 months. Individual sessions in each ward with the alderperson, residents of that ward, basically talking about what do you want the future of Stevens Point to look like, what do you want it to be like as we create the next generation of comprehensive planning here in the city of Stevens Point. The next step now that we have completed all of the neighborhood meetings is the Plan Commission. Other key stakeholders will become involved in the planning process for roughly the next 18 months. Fundamentally answering the question, what do you want this community to look like 20, 25, 30 years from now? What type of visioning are we going to use to develop the kind of community that we want it to be, not only for our children, but for our grandchildren? The Plan Commission will begin meeting a special meeting additionally every month. They already meet once a month. They'll go to 2 meetings a month, and they will focus entirely on the results from our neighborhood comprehensive plan meetings and talking a lot with our stakeholders, the university, a key stakeholder, as I mentioned earlier in this program, area businesses, other stakeholders, the medical community, our clinics, our hospital, and to become really engaged in that visioning process. It's also important to point out there's a group at the university called Revisioning Point, which is starting to take roots at the university level to create a thriving, sustainable, healthy city of Stevens Point. And I'm pleased that our community development director, Michael Ostrowski is working quite closely with those at the university. We'll talk more about that in the near future, but it's another example of something that I touched on briefly in this program. When they talk about university faculty members need to do more or work harder, as the governor says, here again is an example of a group of university professors coming together on their own time to do planning with the city of Stevens Point to make it a more sustainable community. And we'll have more on the revisioning point in the very near future, and to talk about, what that means and why it's important that they're doing that with us. A couple of other questions or comments that I've had recently, and I guess I have the time to explore them here on the program, is as I look at the community. Now, we've talked an awful lot today about the University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point and how important it is to the community. It is interesting as I travel in the community or I'm in stores, shopping, I receive a lot of questions now that I'm back in office talking about the community. And one of the things that I hear a lot about is the debt that I was talking about a few minutes ago. And maybe another way that we can look at debt is from 1995 through the year 2007, that 12-year period, the city had unprecedented economic growth, almost 70% growth in its equalized value because of significant business and corporate reinvestment or initial investment in this community. That growth, unparalleled to anything we had seen in the past or present, really gave this city tremendous flexibility when it came to borrowing money. There was an awful lot that happened. The city between 95 and 2007 partnered with the Portage County government and built, in collaboration as a team, the Portage County Business Park, which sits in the city, and as developments occur there, we of course benefit from a tax point of view from having those developments. We worked aggressively on marketing the existing city business park. So you had 70% growth, unprecedented growth from 2007 all the way back to 1995. Now the economy slowed down, and there are a variety of reasons, but we simply haven't had the type of economic growth that we need in our equalized value to expand our debt service capacity. That's an important part of this equation, and we're continuing to work on that. Another question I get besides explaining debt capacity and equalized value, and I'm pleased that so many people are interested in the topic, is a question that comes up frequently concerns business Highway 51. I've been asked this one a few times in the past couple of weeks. Why did the city of Stevens Point ever accept from the state of Wisconsin the transfer of jurisdiction from Business Highway 51 from state control to city control back in 2005? The simple answer is we did not have a choice. Let me say that again. It was not optional. The state of Wisconsin passed a law that required all cities be given control of business highways. The state legislature initially passed the law to remove business highway designations from the city of Milwaukee because there were so many business highway designations in the city of Milwaukee. And of course there was appropriate state aid that flowed every year because of the number of business highways in a certain city. Well, recognizing they just couldn't have a law that affected Milwaukee, state lawmakers said, okay, we'll make that law affect every city in the state of Wisconsin. So the city of Stevens Point, like the city of Milwaukee, really had no choice but to accept the jurisdictional transfer. Now, to make a long story short, at the time I was extremely unhappy with the Department of Transportation because the amount of money they were offering to take care of the road on transfer wasn't very much at all. And we were engaged in months of very intense negotiations, legal back and forth. I considered challenging this in court, was told by the city attorney at the time that we would not prevail, and why would we want to spend all this money in court if we weren't going to win. So the bottom line was from the state is you either take the jurisdictional transfer of Business 51 to your common council, have them vote to do it, and we will give you a few $1 million, not enough, but about the best we were going to do at the time. Or if you don't accept the transfer of Business Highway 51 to city control, the state will simply impose it on you, and you're not going to get nearly the kind of money that we're talking about today. So bottom line, because I've been asked this question a few times now in the last couple of weeks, why did the city accept it? We had no choice. Business 51 was going to transfer by state law from the jurisdiction of the Department of Transportation to the city of Stevens Point, whether we approved it or not. The other question I've had a couple of times, which has surprised me a little bit in recent weeks, is why was the Clark Street Bridge designed as a 4-lane bridge when it could have been designed as a 2-lane bridge given the traffic today? That's a good question. At the time, though, please remember when the Department of Transportation was designing the Clark Street Bridge, that was a U.S. highway under federal jurisdiction. Highway 10 ran through the community, and the Clark Street Bridge was a part of U.S. Highway 10. It was never an option for the city or the Wisconsin Department of Transportation to basically go with a 2-lane bridge. And I'm not sure how that story got started in the community, but there never was a project designed for the Clark Street Bridge that would have made it 2 lanes. It was only going to be 4 lanes. All the different concepts and designs that I saw, or the Director of Public Works at the time brought up here, were all 4 lanes because it was U.S. Highway 10, and actually was U.S. Highway 10 for a number of years after it was built. So those of you who are interested in why that wasn't a smaller bridge, that's the simple answer. A 2-lane Clark Street Bridge was never an option, although it might have been discussed between local and state officials because it was a federal highway at the time, 4 lanes. And if you think for a moment about that design down there, you'd understand why, and still today, at traffic counts, make it justifiable that it was 4 lanes. Another quick note, I wish to publicly commend a longtime member of the city family, Brent Curlis. Many of you may recognize the name Brent Curlis. Brent is retiring after 41 years. Yes, he said 41 years of exceptional service to the city of Stevens Point. Brent is a member of our inspection department. He has been a city inspector for a long time, and I was quite surprised the other day when he notified city staff that he planned to basically retire after 41 years, or what did he tell me, serving 9 mayors? And then he said, unless I count you, Mayor Wescott, it was 10 mayors, so count me twice. But thank you, Brent Curlis, for 41 years of exceptional service to the people of Stevens Point. You've done an exceptional job. A couple of quick reminders. Again, I talked about it just a moment ago, but we can't stress it enough. February the 17th, circle it on your calendar. It's primary election day in the city of Stevens Point. 6 candidates for mayor will be whittled down to 2. Contested aldermanic races will be whittled down to 2 candidates apiece. 2 candidates for mayor, 2 candidates for alderperson in each ward will advance to the April general election. Now, unfortunately, sometimes when you have such a specialty election, the only thing on the ballot in many districts will be the mayoral race, and in others, a limited aldermanic race. Voter turnout can be sparse. So please remember to vote on February the 17th. It's very important here in the city of Stevens Point. And again, we pledge today our support to Chancellor Patterson, to the university officials, to work with you, our state delegation, in telling the story about massive cuts to the entire university system are too deep, too devastating, and really are unacceptable to the people not only of this community, but of every Wisconsin community, whether you have a university or not. The effects of a university are felt deeply in a community, as university employees are our neighbors, they're our friends, they work in these communities, they spend money in these communities, and never forget what I said before, that cities are the economic engines that drive Wisconsin. State legislature does not drive Wisconsin. They may think they do, but they don't. Cities in this state drive the economy. They drive economic development, and it's absolutely critical that a key partner like the University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point not be diminished in its ability to be an effective partner with this city, this community, this region of the state of Wisconsin. More on that in the near future. As always, if you have comments or questions you'd like me to address here on Community Focus, please feel free to contact me here in the mayor's office. That's Community Focus for today. Thank you for joining us.